Nightwalker is one of those classes I've been seeing a lot more of recently, and was at one point a class I've considered maining way before their rework that made them a lot more approachable for everybody. Whether it's grinding or bossing, being lazy, or getting results from putting in more effort, this class does just about everything you could ever want out of a class. First job has one passive for extra movement speed and avoidability, and two toggles you'll be wanting on all the time. The first is Dark Elemental, which gives a chance to make a mark that stacks twice, and enemies marked by it take 80% damage over time per stack, along with a little bit of IED. Shadow Bat is the second, and it summons a bat for a minute every 3 hits using star skills, up to 2 bats at max. These bats fly out at enemies and bounce around dealing damage, deal more damage to non-boss enemies, and they heal you a little bit. Darksight is a buff that just makes your character semi-transparent and avoid most attacks for however long you keep it on for, or until you attack. The cooldown depends on how many attacks you avoided while in Darksight. Shadow Jump is a standard Thief Flash jump, it can be used twice, it has an up jump, that kind of thing. You can also right-click it to make it so you only flash jump when holding a direction down. I wasn't sure if this had any practical use, but when you flash jump the first time, change directions mid-air, and then flash jump again without holding any directions, it cancels all momentum and sends you straight down. It's pretty nice for positioning. It also has an interesting slight synergy with Darksight. When you use a throwing skill and jump out of it before the animation ends, or buffer a jump by holding it after using said throwing skill, it puts you in Darksight for 2 seconds, and if you do dodge an attack during that time, it reduces Darksight's duration by 20% of that 2 seconds. I'm not sure if that's important or all that useful. Lastly, Shadow Dodge is a neat little backstep skill that can be used both on the ground and mid-air, and acts similarly to the Darksight jump after an attack thing. Shadow Dodges is way faster though, and can also be used for other things like extra mobility, faster repositioning for things like bosses, or getting out of certain tech animations sooner. Second job is almost entirely passives, even buffing up both your toggles. Nothing too crazy, just upping their damage slightly, and 1 extra stack for each one. You also get your first single target star throwing skill, Triple Throw, that attacks one enemy multiple times, targeting the one with the highest health within its range. Every subsequent job rank gets an upgraded version of the skill, usually increasing the stars thrown by 1 each new job rank. Lastly, Shadow Spark is your first mobbing skill, going forward and exploding at the end of its distance, or when it hits its maximum number of mobs. Third job, yep, there it is, Quad Star. It gives an extra line of attack, and it also ups the damage of Shadow Spark. There's also some more passives for you, including this one that prevents all of your skills from ever consuming stars ever again, and this one that gives you Inertia up to 3 stacks. This one racked my brain for a bit, so I had to get the details from a Nightwalker main I personally know. Each stack ends your attack slightly faster, acting as a sort of attack speed buff. It makes a pretty big difference maintaining this buff, even if it initially doesn't seem like it. Your toggles also get a couple new passives too, with Shadow Bat now having an enhanced Shadow Bat for every 5 bats summoned, dealing way more damage. You also get this toggle that acts as an extra life, where if you lose all your health, you get a 2-second iframe, and all bats out and present are consumed to give you 10% health back per bat, 30-minute cooldown. Dark Servant is the last third job skill, but your most important one. It summons a shadow of you, following you around and doing your same movements and star throwing attacks, delayed by about half a second. It does the same amount of lines as your normal attacks, but 70% final damage of your skills that it can use. Since it has no cooldown, you'll want to keep this on at all times. Fourth job has the ever so prevalent Maple Warrior and Hero's Will, a bunch more passives, including this one that gives you a small shield when Dark Elemental's Life Force Absorbed reaches 30 stacks, and your toggles get some more passive buffs. In Bat Affinity 3's case, however, it now works with 2 toggles. Ravenous Bat is the more boss-focused version of Shadow Bat, acting the exact same, except when it flies out at an enemy, it doesn't bounce around. It only damages the first enemy it goes to. It also doesn't get all the extra normal enemy damage Shadow Bat gets, but it does heal more than Shadow Bat. Shadow Stitch is a bind you hold down for a longer duration, 10 seconds for the initial press, increasing up to 12 seconds if you hold the skill for the full 5 seconds, 3-minute cooldown. Dark Omen is a sort of summon skill that lasts for 5 seconds with a 20-second cooldown, with the cooldown decreasing per attack it does. It also summons bats every 3 enemies you hit, though they don't decrease the skill's cooldown. Oh look, Quintuple Star gives an extra line and more damage too. This is your most important skill that you'll be using for bossing forever pretty much. For hyper skills, you get Dominion, which is a map-wide attack that makes the background a purpley night sky, and grayscales most of the map. When you're initially casting it, it also counts as an iframe and gives you max momentum stacks both when casted and at the very end of the skill. Beyond that, for its entire 30-second duration, it buffs your final damage a bit, maxes out your crit rate, and maxes all the stacks of your toggles with your throwing star skills. 3-minute cooldown, and you can right-click to toggle the grayscale background if you don't like that. You can also shadow dodge out of this skill to skip its long animation. Glory of the Guardians is another epic adventure-like skill. 1 minute uptime, 2-minute cooldown, 10% damage for you and all Cygnus Knight classes in your party, including Mihail. And Shadow Illusion ups your shadows from 1 to 3 for 30 seconds. Same limitations for movement and attacks, but the damage for the shadows goes from 70% final damage on the first, 50% on the second, and 30% on the third. 3-minute cooldown. Hyper passives are pretty simple. You'll want Quintuple Star Reinforce and Boss Rush, Dark Omen Cooldown Cutter, which halves its cooldown, and Vitality Siphon Extra Point and Reinforce. If you really wanted to, you could swap out Extra Point for another passive, but there's not much else really worth it outside of like Dark Omen Reinforce. Vitality Summons passives are worth it because you'll be having that up fairly frequently, and that's just 60 extra attack, which isn't bad at all. Fifth job is where things start to really pick up for Nightwalker, starting off with Shadow Bite. Click the skill, and bats appear at the location of enemies, and act as normal depending on if you have Shadow or Ravenous Bats toggled. It also increases the final damage on both normal enemies and bosses. 15-second cooldown, and there's a semi-popular method of training with them called bite farming that I'll talk about in a bit, or you can click the bite farming chapter if you wanted to go right to it. Shadow Spear is a buff that summons shadows on the ground every time you attack, and eventually combine into spears. It also forms a bigger spear that does more damage, just about every 4 seconds, and all the spears do more damage against normal enemies. The cooldown ranges depending on your level of the skill, going from a little over 3 minutes to just under 3 minutes at max level, 192 seconds down to 177. Rapid Throw is a burst skill with a 90-second cooldown that does a bunch of damage for 1.8 seconds, and finishes off at the end with a big star that does way more damage. It also puts you in Dark Sight for the entire duration. Tapping the skill repeatedly during its duration increases the throw time up to 3 seconds. This skill can be used in the air, and if you have Shadow Spear up while using the skill, it ups the damage of it even further. Greater Dark Servant gives you yet another shadow, except this one stays in place, menacingly. It attacks as you'd expect, and you can use it as a teleport of sorts, swapping places with it up to 3 times. 60-second cooldown, and its duration increases the higher the skill level. For other useful nodes Nightwalkers get, there's Empress Cygnus's Blessing, which gets 2 charges, 1 every 4 minutes upon logging in or equipping the node, and occasionally restores a percentage of health at intervals. Phalanx Charge sends some friends with spears forward, dealing damage to everything in their path. Click the skill again to change their direction, 30-second cooldown. Lastly, Last Resort is a skill that has 2 stages. Stage 1 gives you some final damage at the cost of 20% of your avoidability and hit damage taken, and clicking it again sends you to Stage 2, which halves the remaining duration, eats up 90% of your avoidability, further increases your hit damage taken, and just about triples your final damage. Clicking the skill a 3rd time cancels it entirely. You can also right-click to toggle it so it immediately goes into Stage 2 for 15 seconds. The cooldown starts off at 90 seconds, and at max level, it goes down to 75 seconds. Nightwalker doesn't have that much that makes them super technical or complicated, but here's how to make them easy. Make sure to change which bat toggle you're using, depending on your situation. Use Shadow Bat for grinding and Ravenous Bat for bossing. Shadow can be a nice situational toggle in certain bosses to help clear out all the mobs, but if you're focused on just one boss, keep Ravenous on. Ravenous also heals a lot more per proc, 5% health compared to 1% on Shadow, so that combined with Vitality Siphon every 30 stacks will keep you pretty healthy nearly all the time. Vitality Siphon also protects against one-shots too, making your health go over 100%. That's a pretty important thing to remember and take note of. You'll also be wanting to maintain those shadow momentum stacks. In bossing, this can be done by simply flash jumping forward once, or using Shadow Dodge twice. Speaking of Shadow Dodge, it's a great positional tool, and you'll be wanting to use it often in bosses, since there's not really a downside to spamming it. It can move you out of harm's way, be used in the air, cancels some attack animations, puts you in Dark Sight extremely often, and it maintains your shadow momentum stacks. You'll be wanting to use it constantly for bosses. Shadow Jump's toggle is useful too as another positioning tool, but has a slight learning curve to get it right. If you plan on bossing, it's worth learning and practicing the drop technique. Again, with Shadow Jump toggled on, jump, hold arrow key forward or backward, jump again or click flash jump, turn around mid-air, let go of the arrow keys, jump a third time or click flash jump a second time. I'll also mention Dark Elemental altogether throughout the job ranks, adds up to 7% IED per stack at 5 total stacks. That's 35% passive IED that doesn't show up on your character stats window. For grinding, you have 2 main options. The first is just placing your summons down like Dark Omen, or Urda Shower and Will Skill if you have those, and using Shadow Spark to mob enemies. The other is bite farming. You ever wonder why sometimes you go to some maps in Arcane River onward and see some players dead or just standing there? Chances are they're a Nightwalker and they're bite farming. Simplified, it's literally just using Shadow Bite while you have Shadow Bat toggled on, so then those initial bats kill enemies and the remaining bats bounce around the map at other mobs. That is it. It's arguably a pretty inefficient way to farm because of its 15-second cooldown, so you'll also be needing to invest in at least a 2-second cooldown hat to make this a bit better, at around 70% efficiency of your non-bite farming active rates. At 6th job, the enhanced version of bite reduces the skill's cooldown. Be aware it can affect your rates, unless you're actively watching when mobs spawn before using bite. As a method of lazy farming, compounded with summons like Will Skill and or Urda Nova, or if you have a stationary boss soul like Lucid, it's a very middle-of-the-road, fine way to grind. Your rates will be pretty bad, but the appeal of it is how low effort it is. You just press one button every 15 seconds and loot occasionally. If you do bite farm though, make sure you're at your computer and not weighing down the key or using some auto hotkey macro to do the one press for you. You can, and most likely will get banned eventually. It's happened to people I know. Just do it for more comfortable lazy grinding. Don't use it as some form of getting a character up without even being present for the game. Just be active, be aware, and you've been warned. And informed. So this next part applies to Nightlords too, but for stars, you'll want anything with the highest attack you can get. There's a lot to choose from. The go-to first best one would be getting a pack of Ilbies in most general shops for 3 mil Mesos, which have 27 attack. There are some harder to get ones that give a little bit more attack, but only up to 30 at the highest, which are Balanced Furies. To get these, you have to grind out Crimsonwood Forest dailies for a fair bit of time, around 2-ish weeks to get these. Same with Crystal Ilbies, which are 1 attack less than Furies, but look way cooler. There's also Flamethrowing Stars, which have 29 attack, same as Crystal Ilbies, but only drop from enemies, and getting that recipe can take an extremely long time. You have to craft them, and getting the recipe may be a huge pain, but you can transfer them through your storage if you have a character that isn't your Nightwalker that has a higher level of smithing. For inner ability, the first line you'll ideally want is boss damage. Second and third lines would be extra damage to abnormal status enemies, and crit rate, because Nightwalker's initial crit rate is a little on the lower side, not quite reaching 100%. The settles are the same as any other class, flat attack, dropper meso lines, but that first line they don't really get much comparable or better for. First line attack would be fine, maybe if you get abnormal status first line too, but everything else does next to nothing for them. Normal monster damage would be fine enough too if you plan on grinding with them a lot and are worried about your bat damage. Link skills are just about the same as any other class. You might want to make sure to get Ilium Link at the least, since it fits your Shadow Momentum passive almost perfectly, and that's just moving for extra damage on 2 fronts. But for grinding, something along the lines of this, prioritizing Mercedes, Evan, and Iran. Lara too if you want a little extra normal enemy damage. And for bossing, damage links such as these. Again, since Nightwalker is slightly low on crit rate, you might want to get some links for that too. Things like Phantom and or Explorer Archer's links. If they don't rework Beast Tamer's link when she becomes Lyn, hers too, since that also gives boss damage alongside crit. For Trinodes, you could either go for 2 perfect sets of Trinodes, or 3 slant perfects if you plan on using your Nightwalker as a potential main. For the perfect set, you'll want Quintuple Star, Shadow and Ravenous Bats, and Dark Omen. These are your main attacks you'll be using for bossing, and Bats and Dark Omen for grinding. Good enough if you just wanted this class as a boss mule. The 3 slant perfect Trinode setup is comprised of 2 Quint Throws, 2 Sparks, 2 Dark Omens, 2 Bats, and 1 Dominion, or whatever else you want. Dominion's usually what people pick. For Burst/BA, make sure you have your bats of choice on. usually Ravenous, alongside Dark Elemental. Then, buff up as you normally would, pop your 5th job buffs like Shadow Spear and Greater Dark Servant, Will Skill if you have that, pop Shadow Bite, Dominion and then cancel its animation by Shadow dodging out of it, Shadow Illusion, Last Resort and AB Link if you have those too, keep tapping Rapid Throw, then keep spamming Quintuple Star. Whoa, that's a mouthful. Okay, let's simplify all this. Toggles on, buff up, 5th job buffs, Bite, Dominion, cancel long animation with Shadow Dodge, Shadow Illusion, AB and Last Resort, tap Rapid Throw, spam Quint Throw. It looks huge and scary, but it really is just buff up, user burst skills, spam main bossing skill. That's it. This class often gets compared or stacked up against Nightlord, and rightfully so. They're both pretty similar and use the same weapon and stars, deal similar damage, etc. But there's something about Nightwalker that just feels way more comfortable, to me at least. It's probably part of the reason why I'm seeing more and more people pick this class up recently. Both are very good classes, but Nightlord is more so seen as strictly the amazing endgame bosser that's been Nexon's favorite child for over a decade, while Nightwalker is just overall good at everything for way less investment. It's a very good approachable class for people new to the game, and it has a fairly high skill ceiling that's pretty forgiving, with all the short cooldowns and positioning tools and such. Even if you didn't want to learn any of that, just playing the class as normal is extremely doable for just about anyone. Thanks for watching, thanks to the Nightwalker main close in my life for helping me correct information for this guide, and thanks to the Nightwalker Discord for their pretty in-depth coverage of this class. They go in deep with explaining all of Nightwalker's small inner workings, and do a great job of covering most aspects of every skill and passive Nightwalker gets. If there's more guides or videos you want to see me do in the future, let me know in the comments down below. I still have a couple more videos lined up for me to make before getting around to those though, so back to work I go on those. That's all.